Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I know I said 6:30, but I got bored, so I'm going to start now. We're going to wait for a few people to kind of trickle in. I'm going to see if I can get some of these stray hairs to tuck up into this hat here. I got a new hat on. I actually have a lot of these hats. I just usually only wear the coral snake and the beaded lizard hat, but you know, whatever. So we're going to wait for a few more people to trickle in, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of what I'm hoping to get done this year and some of what we're hoping to do soon. And I'm going to ask you guys some of the stuff that you would really like to see. Everybody's starting to trickle in. Hey, everybody. Pizza's good. I have not eaten dinner yet, so I'm a bit peckish. But as we wait for everybody to kind of trickle in, how about some trivia? Let's see who knows their animal facts. Let's think of some animal trivia. How about this? Does anybody know what the three major groups of mammals are? There's three major groups of mammals. We classify them due to some morphological and physiological differences. So can anybody tell me what the three distinct groups of mammals are? Anybody? Scuba diver Derek says bats, rodents, and not quite. Bats and rodents are actually in the same one of these three groups. Adam down on Instagram says big, medium, and small. Okay. I'd say there's a lot of wiggle room there, but that's a good joke. Anybody know? Does anybody know? Andy gets it. Very good. Monotremes, which are egg-laying mammals, marsupials, which raise their offspring in a pouch, and placental mammals like us that have a womb or uterus, and they give live birth to their offspring that way. So that's exactly right. Those are our three major groups of mammals. So all mammals fall into one of these three groups. The majority are placental, like people, dogs, rats, cats, bats, whales, bears. Most of those are placental mammals. Most of mammals in general, all of those that I just listed are placental mammals. Then we have the marsupials, things like opossums, things like kangaroos, wallabies, Tasmanian devils, that type of stuff. And then, of course, one of my favorites, the monotremes, which are our echidnas and our platypodes. And they lay eggs. Oh, we love our platypuses. But very good. Okay, how about this one? Let's think here. I want a good one. Does anybody know what the largest land mammal to ever exist was? Does anybody know? Largest land mammal to ever exist. Land mammal. So we're not going to be talking about whales or anything like that. We discount them. Land mammals. So we know a few pretty big groups of mammals. A few people in the comments, African elephant or mastodon, really good guesses. We had some really, really big pachyderms. But they were all dwarfed by one mammal. Adam down here gets it. Paraceratherium or Indricotherium is a giant hornless rhinoceros. And that's actually what that means. Para meaning without, and cera meaning horn. And then therium, of course, meaning beast. Paraceratherium or Indricotherium was a very large, probably arboreally foraging, meaning it would be eating trees, an arboreal grazer, land mammal, largest land mammal to ever exist. Haley says, hi, I don't know if you remember me, but you went through Whataburger one night like 6 months ago, and you gave me your card. Me and my coworkers were so amazed by everything you had in your car. I do remember that. So actually, that's a funny story. I was on the way back from Houston, which is where I get all of my supplies for my frog business. And I had my car filled with plants. Like I had like 30 bromeliads in there, and like I want to say 12 feet of monstera plants and pothos and all sorts of giant broadleaf plants. And my car was just chock full, and it was like maybe, I don't know, midnight, and there was no other places open. So I pull up to Whataburger and I go to get my food, and they're like, what is with all the plants in your car? And I'm like, oh, well, funny story. I breed dart frogs, and I'm picking up, about $1,500 worth of plants for a service customer of mine who needs a bunch of plants for some giant enclosures. And so they were like, oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, you should check out my YouTube. And so I have these really cool. Oh, let me show you guys. I have some really cool Jack Swirtle Wildlife business cards that I hand out so that I can get people, watching the content. But here are my little cards. So they've got the inverted logo, Jack Swirtle Wildlife. And then, that's going to be hard to read probably. Jack Swirtle Wildlife. We got the YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, email, recycled paper, on brand. But yeah, that's a funny story. I do remember that. Okay, let's do two more. Okay, does anybody know what? Let me think. I'll keep it easy. I'll keep it on wildlife because that's what I've been teaching you all. That last one was tricky because that's a little bit of paleontology, which I'd like to include more on the show because I am a big fan of paleontology. Does anybody know what the main difference between boas and pythons is? Does anybody know the main difference between a boa and a python? Can be a tricky one. They're both constrictors, right? They both can vary in size. Anacondas are a type of boa. Burmese pythons get quite large as well. That's exactly right. Derek got it first. Boas give live birth, while pythons are egg layers. So that's right. Most of your species of pythons are going to lay leathery kind of eggs, and they're going to usually guard those eggs for quite some time until they hatch and all their little tiny babies spring forth. Whereas a lot of boa species just give straight live birth. So they just spit them out. They're in a thin kind of sac, and they punch through that, wiggle out, and then they are essentially born right there. No incubation time needed. So they essentially they are having those embryos develop while inside of them instead of laying the eggs and letting the embryos develop externally. So if you're on the Instagram, go ahead and transition over to YouTube because we are going to keep everything on there from now on. But thank you for tuning in on Instagram. Let's see here, shutting this down. Let me put it on IGTV. How about you guys open up with some questions for me? I'm thinking stuff along the lines of, can you tell us any sort of plans for 2021? Can you confirm or deny if this type of animal is on your list to get filmed this year? So start throwing in some questions in the chat. I'm going to upload this really quick. Let's see here. I'm just gonna throw that real quick onto the onto the Instagram. So I'm trying to be more active on all of my social media platforms. All right, great. So we've got some questions pooling out. I'm gonna put my phone away now so I'm not distracted. Do you know what animal has the most deadly total system shutdown venom or poison? Very, very great question. There's a few that actually spring to mind. I think some of the most dangerous venom on the planet is a type of venom that is called a sodium channel disruptor. And what that does is it essentially either tells your body on a cellular level to close up or open up all of your sodium channels. And for sodium, you need that for every bodily system that goes on. So essentially, it's like complete and total like cellular paralysis, like across the board. And there's two species that come to mind: the blue ring octopus and Calliopus bivirgatus, or the Malaysian blue coral snake. Both of those organisms have an incredibly toxic sodium channel disrupting venom. And there's even been some reports of people dying almost immediately because their brain stops, their heart stops, their lung stops, everything stops with the introduction of this venom. A lot of people are like, well, gosh, that's really quick. But venom actually spreads fairly quickly in the body. Our blood pumps at about 3 feet per second. So one little boom can actually completely circulate venom throughout your body in a matter of seconds. So usually towards the bite, it'll be more localized, but some of those intense venom reactions are pretty quick. Some other really toxic species are like Phyllobates terribilis, the golden arrow frog, but that takes about 20 minutes to kill you. There's no cure for most of these, really. If you can treat the symptoms fast enough, sometimes you can survive with some of these powerful neurotoxins. But like I said, it'd really be easier to treat a sodium channel disruptor with another sodium channel disruptor, because some of them flood your sodium gate channels, some of them close them all up. So if you put them against each other, theoretically, you could survive. But I'm not going to carry around a blue ring octopus and a Malaysian coral snake and have them bite me at the same time just so nothing can happen. Yeah, there's some really impressively toxic animals on this planet. In particular, the ones that come to mind, again, Malaysian blue coral snake, blue ring octopus, of course, a lot of the Phyllobates terribilis morphs are very, very deadly in the wild. So that's my answer for that. Will I ever go spelunking for cave sallies? I'd love to find some more salamanders. I had a dream about finding salamanders like last night. No joke. Because I was looking at some iNaturalist reports about smallmouth salamanders around me, because that's actually one of the few species of salamanders I've been able to find in Texas. If you recall back to, I think it was the very, very, very end, or maybe right at the beginning of 2019, right before I went to Thailand, my buddy Daniel Carter with Afro Herb Keeper, we went and found some little plethodon salamanders in Austin. But that's the last time I think I found salamanders. I found a smallmouth salamander one time before at a park by my house, and I was like freaking out because I'd never seen any salamanders in Texas before. But I'd love to go looking for more salamander species. I'm hoping this year we can head out east a little bit, maybe into the Appalachians or over into that area. And there's a lot of really cool amphibian diversity, salamander diversity. So I'd love to get more salamanders on camera. Hey Jack, if you ever want to meet my tarantulas and do an informative video or just a video of you handling them, I'd be happy to have you. I own over 270 species. Oh wow. Yeah, maybe, sure. I'm trying to get a whole bunch of content for this year. I'd like to release like 2 videos a week. that's my goal outside of live streams. I want to be able to release 2 videos per week. I'm worried that that's not going to be super viable, but that's my goal. At least 1 video a week plus a live stream. I think we're right on the edge of really starting to see some pretty crazy growth. Every year we've more than doubled our sub count. Like I think 2019 we were at about 1,500 subs for most of that year. At the end of 2020 we were at about well, actually towards the middle of 2020 we gained 6,000 subscribers in 2020. And right at the end of 2020 we were really nearing 10K, and we just hit 10K January of 2021. So I'm hoping now that we've got enough of a base to where we can start to see a little bit more exponential growth. I'm trying to get a bunch of stuff planned, but it is really difficult because we're still, I mean, a moderately small channel. So it's very difficult to try and get in with certain places and upgrade certain equipment because it's quite a lot of an investment of both time, money, and resources to produce these videos for you guys. But I think they're starting to look a lot better. If I could toot my own horn, I think that some of the stuff that we did in Florida, the manatees and the shark video, all of that stuff turned out like really great. The sloth video turned out really great. So stuff is kind of like getting closer and closer to my kind of standard of where I'd like all the videos to be. Because I mean, I've been doing this since 2018. And some of my old videos, I'm watching them, I'm going, oh man, that's not very good. But some of our videos I really do like, and some of them, I get kind of confused at why they don't perform so well. But I'm always looking to produce more content here because I need to. So I'll definitely, if I'm in the area, I'm in Oklahoma every once in a while. We filmed a ton of videos in Oklahoma last year. Blind snake, giant softshell turtle, pygmy rattlesnake, catching a black widow, all catching a giant centipede. All that was in Oklahoma. Let's see. What about the box jellyfish? The box jellyfish is pretty toxic, but just kind of not in that same way. It takes a lot of the nematocysts, which are the stinging cells that go along the tentacle, to kill you. Like theoretically, you could cut up, a bit of that nematocyst and sting yourself with, a handful of stingers and not get a lethal amount of toxin. But to the best of my knowledge, it's fairly treatable, much more treatable than things like Calliophis or Phyllobates toxins. So I'm not sure that it would be one of the more dangerous. It's definitely one of the more toxic organisms on the planet. But as far as like survivability, that's really where I'm kind of factoring in these top elite style organisms where you've got reports of people just dying like immediately or no cure, and they're slowly dying for 15-20 minutes and then they're just gone. But I mean, like I said, toxicity really doesn't even come into play most of the time because stuff can be life-threatening regardless. I mean, there's some less venomous species like Bothrops asper, less venom toxicity than Calliophis, but I've heard reports again of people just dying immediately from shock after that much, like a large Bothrops pit viper grabbing onto their leg or something while they're on a hike, and they're dead within minutes. So it's like, okay, yeah, after a certain point, toxicity really isn't even it doesn't matter anymore because it's just like, okay, you die pretty quickly after getting bitten. Anyway, so it doesn't matter if it kills you in a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It's just, it kills you. But yeah, those are all great questions. Thought box jellyfish and sea snake were some of the most venomous. Yeah, I mean, they are. But like I said, again, It's a matter of likeliness to well, I wouldn't say that. That makes it more dangerous. Venom, per se, is kind of a subjective a matter, because things like a Black Widow is like 15 or 20 times the venom potency of something like a rattlesnake. But if you get bitten by a Black Widow, you're much less likely to have health complications than even getting bitten by a tiny, rattlesnake, and that's because of yield. So yield has a lot to do with actual danger. You could have the most venomous organism on the planet, but if it can't inject enough of that into you to actually kill you, is it, how do we define that? And so venom, we calculate it out typically off of an LD50 scale. How much does it take to kill, 50% of, your test population? And so most of the venom toxicity stuff is based off of mice and rats in a lab setting, and they haven't tested a bunch of organisms, and some things, are hard to access and keep alive in a lab setting and study venom wise. And so we don't, we have a lot of information on that type of thing, but we also don't really know how much of that is going to affect our test subjects and things like that, and people. But those are all good questions. Is the Brazilian wandering spider more deadly than the city funnel web spider? I've heard conflicting info. I couldn't tell you. They're both super toxic, very medically significant spiders. Both can be pretty defensive, although I will say from all the Phonutria, the wandering spiders that I've interacted with, they've been pretty calm. The one I'm most familiar with is Phonutria boliviensis, which is a Central American wandering spider, one you find pretty commonly in Costa Rica. And they're just, pretty docile, pretty calm. Atrax robustus, the Sydney funnel web, is a super, super dangerous species of spider, very defensive, pretty quick to bite if it's grabbed or harassed in any sort of way. They're really toxic. But like I said, again, they're fairly treatable. So there's not really a lot of deaths that I know of from either one of those in an area where you can get treatment pretty quickly. It takes a few days for a lot of that spider venom to really kind of, get you to kick the bucket. Mostly because it's that yield. If you were injected by a king cobra and its venom glands were full of Brazilian wandering spider or Sydney funnel web spider venom, you would be dead in a second. Like, they can inject so much venom, and with that level of toxicity, you would really be in trouble. But because it's in tiny little venom glands of the spider, it can take days to kill you. So I usually don't use the word deadly to describe most spiders. Even some of the really nasty ones just kind of give you lingering side effects, sometimes permanently, because they can affect some of your nervous system and things like that. Organs, they can affect your organs. But really and truly, most spider bites are survivable. If they're in an area where bites are common, there's usually a game plan in place to kind of treat that. Tyler asks, are snakes mean? No, I wouldn't classify them as mean. And mostly, I'm going to equivocate that to aggressive. Snakes really aren't that aggressive. I've run into some defensive snakes that thought they were going to get hurt and they were trying to defend themselves. But as far as just going out of their way to be cantankerous and aggressive or mean, no, you're not really going to find a snake that's willing to do that. There's a few snakes that are proactively defensive, is how I call it. Among that list is going to be, sometimes you can get a king cobra that's like, I feel like you could maybe hurt me, so I'm just going to go ahead and bite you just to discourage you from doing that. And other species like larger forest cobras and mambas, can be pretty cantankerous. But like I said, again, if you give them space and they're not feeling threatened at all, they're not going to really go out of their way to attack you. Let's see. Has anyone figured out how to get captive dart frogs to produce their poison? I've heard that They have not found out what they eat in nature to produce their poison. The issue with that is that dart frogs in the wild are probably feeding on upwards of 400 different species of microfauna, mites and ants and fly larvae and tiny flies and gnats and all sorts of stuff. They're eating any little thing that moves across the forest floor. So in captivity, we actually have to pretty heavily supplement them because we feed them maybe 4 or 5 different things instead of hundreds. So there's certain areas where they lack certain vitamins because their whole little natural kind of food web is giving them a lot of diversity, a lot of different vitamins here and there. So that's why we can't produce their toxin, not because we don't know what they make their toxin out of. We know it's something that they eat. We know it's microfauna that they're eating, most likely mites. But tracking down that specific species or specific group of organisms that they're eating is going to be very difficult. And a lot of those organisms are specialized to that specific environment. So even if we knew, oh, it's Megalomytus, toxicus, well, we might not be able to reproduce that organism in captivity because it might depend on a single plant that doesn't exist anywhere else or can't be exported out of the country. So it's just kind of a, they live healthy lives without that toxin. That's to protect them in the wild from predators. In captivity, they don't have predators. So really, other than just being able to say, oh yeah, they're still poisonous, which you could, lie to people anyway and get the same kind of effect of, oh yeah, I sell poisonous dart frogs, because people aren't going to go in there and be like, oh really, let me try it out. But that's a great question. You could theoretically be able to bring them and give them everything that they eat in the wild, but it would just be way more trouble than it's worth. It's just like, okay, they're not dangerous. I can grab them and touch them if I need to. In fact, it hurts the frogs more for us to touch them than for them to touch us in captivity, because we always have oil and salts and things like that on our hands, and that's actually harmful to the sensitive semi-permeable skin of amphibians. Like daddy longlegs, actually not quite. That is a wives' tale. That daddy longlegs are, the most venomous spider in North America, and it's just because they can't bite you that they're not dangerous. Most spiders are venomous. There's a handful that are not, but most spiders do have venom. Just some is medically significant, some isn't. Daddy longleg venom or opiliones, they're not technically spiders. They're another group of arachnid. They do not really have that toxic of venom, and they don't bite because they mostly feed on like detritus and fungus and weird stuff. Can snakes kill you in under a minute? Some can, but again, that doesn't make them aggressive in any sort of means. There's some species, like I mentioned before, some of the more toxic species like Calliophis, that theoretically could paralyze your body pretty immediately. Other species, you could, if somebody got bit by like an 18-foot like bushmaster or something, not only would that like break your leg to be bitten by a viper that large, but your body would probably go into shock just from the sheer amount of toxins that just entered your body. That's like 4 shots where there's like this much of venom, pooling through your blood, and you would just. So there's size, a dosage, yield, quantity, all of that stuff, and your physical condition. An unhealthier person could have a lot more adverse effects to being bitten by a seriously venomous snake, or somebody who's already, hiking for days and days and days, physically exhausted. They could succumb to the effects of venom much quicker as well. So everything kind of is variable. Sometimes snakes, like the person mentioned below you, dry bite. What that means is they bite you just as a warning, and they don't inject a lot or any venom at all. And there's actually a lot of snakes that do that, and that's actually really common, because in the wild, those snakes, their venom is for defense on a secondary scale. On the primary scale, that venom is what procures their food. That's how they can kill and partially digest their food. So a lot of wild snakes don't waste that. they'll be like, well, I'm not going to inject any venom because that could be, tomorrow's dinner is gone. I can't kill it because some of those vipers and elapids, they're not designed to really grab onto and hold some of their prey. Some of them are quick bite and release, and then they follow it and track it with that tongue. And so they're not quick to waste that valuable, biological asset that they possess. So a lot of snakes will dry bite. They won't inject any venom at all. And that's lucky for us. Wild snakes do that a lot more often than captive bred snakes. It's pretty crazy to see the difference between calculated dry bites versus wet bites in captive snakes versus wild snakes. I've seen some stuff where it's like about 75% of all wild king cobra bites in a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia are dry. They don't really inject a lot or hardly any venom. It's just kind of a, hey, stop messing with me. But in captivity, it's like the opposite. Like 70 to 80% of all bites are wet, sometimes up to 90% in some cases, which means that they are injecting venom. So it gets, you can kind of see the pampered snakes who've got venom to spare, they're a little quicker to throw some your way if you're bothering them. Have you ever encountered an alligator snapping turtle? Not in the wild. That's one of my absolute biggest target species of any type of reptile ever. I've been out to some places to look for them before with no luck. I'm really hoping I was trying to get in the talks with some of the people who do alligator snapping turtle surveys in Texas to see if I could join them and film a Jack's for Wildlife episode talking about turtle conservation while we're measuring and tagging some of these larger individuals that are super important to keep track of for their conservation. So maybe I'm able to get that done this year. Alligator snapping turtles are a protected species in Texas. So I can't just run out and just grab one. I have to kind of be under the supervision or affiliation of an approved group. But I would absolutely love to. That's one of my all-time favorite species of turtle. That's probably my favorite freshwater turtle in the world. Very cool, very awesome. I've been able to work with a lot in the past in a captive setting, but no dice on wild ones. So I would love to get some of that filmed. Is it possible that other frogs, non-poisonous species, will eat species of poisonous invertebrates that poisonous frogs eat, but they don't use it as their own poison, so they aren't poisonous? It's essentially correct. A lot of organisms can eat toxic organisms, but if they haven't adapted those systems to kind of glean and use those toxins, they can actually either get sick and die, or they just don't retain any of that toxin and they eat it in small enough amounts that they just eat it and digest it and poop it out. But that's exactly right. The poison dart frogs are special in the sense that they possess these natural systems to allow them to hold on to some of those toxic chemicals and bond them together for their own protection. As opposed to, some random frog just eating a bunch of poisonous stuff, chances are he's likely to get sick or, of course, not become poisonous versus some of these poison dart frogs who have adapted over years and years and years and years and years of symbiotic relationship with a lot of these other toxins and organisms that they're feeding on. And then they become more one with what they're eating and what they're doing. Let's see. Hi from Ontario, Canada. I'm new to the channel. Well, welcome, Jake. I love Canada. I'd like to get back up there. I was in Victoria last summer trying to film some orca whales. We didn't quite get what I wanted, so I'm going to hold on to that footage, and I'm hoping we can get some more stuff, preferably this year. But there's a really cool thing out of Norway where you can free dive with orca whales that I've really had my eye on, so maybe we'll get to do some of that. Is the pain of the giant desert centipede exaggerated online? You probably know who that is aimed at. I can't personally speak to it because I've never been bitten by the giant centipede. I've got some friends who say that the centipede was really, really rough. But I've got other friends who say, meh, it's not that bad. Centipede venom is super variable, super variable. It can vary from locale to locale, from county to county. And that's why I don't feel comfortable doing a sting test on it because I don't actually know what the venom composition is going to be. Centipedes are super understudied, especially the larger groups, the scolopendromorphs. That's just kind of a colloquial name. There's not a ton of similarities or kind of guidelines based off of how we do a lot of centipede taxonomy. So it's kind of just like, maybe it could be super, super dangerous. Maybe it could kill you. Maybe it could cause, dangerous heart complications in the future. Maybe it could go unnoticed for 10 years and then pop back up. I don't know what the venom's going to do. As far as the pain goes, I'm sure it's exaggerated. Really and truly, I actually have had some friends tell me that some of the more exotic centipedes are nasty. I had a buddy of mine, Christopher Shannon, telling me a story about he was bitten by, I think, a 14-inch centipede he was keeping. I'm forgetting what species it was. I believe it was one of the species from Southeast Asia, a really, really big one. And he was just handling it, and it started to fall off his hand, and it just grabbed on with those front two legs, which are modified pincers, and just accidentally injected a little bit of venom trying to hold on, and it fell. And he said he blacked out from the pain. He was like blacked out for like 10 hours until he woke up, and it was just like the worst pain that he ever experienced. Like he like screamed and then just like fainted. So that is like crazy. That's like total body shutdown. So as far as that goes, that sounds pretty painful to me. Any wasp, any bee, any ant that I've had, any hornet, has never done anything close to that. The only time I've ever really acted outside of just my own rationale and just not even being able to hold in a reaction was Vespa Tropica. When I stung myself and I yelled, I was like, ah, it's kind of like a laughing yell, and I'm like, ha ha ha, wow, finally something that really hurts. That was involuntary, that first sound. But other than that, I can compose myself and talk about it. I'm like, wow, yeah, that really hurts. So I think most of the pain about that stuff is exaggerated. And my theory of that is this stuff would hurt a lot more if you're not expecting it. If I got tagged by a Vespa Tropica, like on my back, and it crawled into my shirt and I didn't know, I'd be freaking out because you're scared. You don't know if you're really hurt. You don't know like what got you, if there's more, if it's going to happen again. You don't know. You're trying to figure it out. So there's a lot of adrenaline, and that makes the experience more dramatic and more painful. But if you're going, oh, I know it's going to hurt. 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 Oh, yeah, it hurts. Wow, that's interesting. You're not really being hurt. It's just those nerves telling your body, oh, wow, that really hurts. And you brace yourself essentially mentally. And so to have somebody, say, oh, that's not true. You're going to be rolling around the ground. You can't control yourself. Like, I've had so many people trying to argue with me about my reaction towards stings. And I'm like, this is my reaction. Have you ever been stung by it? No, but I saw one other video of somebody being stung by this exact thing, and they reacted differently than you. I'm like, well, that's not, you're basing all your information off of one person's video. And I'm telling you, seems like that was exaggerated. This is, I mean, I don't have a particularly high pain tolerance at all. People make fun of me. My wife, when she'll brush my hair sometimes with her brush, and it hurts me. I've got a really tender head. I just always have. I've got sensitive skin. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have this titanium pain tolerance that people assume I have because I've been able to endure these, certain stings. It's just, I'm expecting it, and it's going to hurt. It's going to feel like burning, but I mean, I've got to imagine, really actually being hurt is going to hurt a lot more. So that's my answer for that. You're in Texas. Is that where the heinous rattlesnake roundup happens each year? I heard the rattlers there don't rattle because of that. Amazing fast evolution. Yes, sadly, I believe it's in Springwater, Texas. The rattlesnake roundup is still a thing, and it's horrific. They actually will go into neighboring states, flood brumation dens where these snakes are gathering to survive the winter together, out in the middle of the desert, away from people, away from livestock, and they'll pull them out, they'll bring them, they'll sew their mouths shut and do shows with them, they'll cut them up, they'll chop them up alive. Snakes can survive for quite some time, even after decapitation. They pretend like, oh, well, we're milking them. All that stuff is done in an unsterile environment. None of that is actually going to be able to be used. So everything that they tell people, any of the benefits of those roundups, complete and total bull honky. And then they have these massive rodent spikes, which can cause zoonotic disease spreads and more pandemics. Those mammals come in close proximity with people. Their main natural predators are gone. They start to breed. Their parasites start to breed. Their external parasites start to breed, and that can cross over into people. And so when we disrupt these natural systems by these horrible roundups, then that screws us over. And so what Tom mentions here as well, I heard the rattlers don't rattle. There's truth in that. It's not everywhere. There's plenty of rattlesnakes that will still rattle in Texas because there's quite a few. There's a lot of different species of rattlesnakes, first off, but particularly the Western diamondback rattlesnake is what's targeted for these roundups. But when you take all of the rattlesnakes that you can find by listening for them, all of the ones that are quick to rattle, and you scoop those up, put them in a bag and kill them. The ones that are not quick to rattle, or maybe have smaller rattles, or maybe genetically they were born without a rattle or something like that, they're surviving and they're being able to breed. So they're passing down those traits into their offspring. So over the course of just a few generations, you can have a drastically decreased amount of rattling rattlesnakes. And the same is true for like elephants and rhinos in Africa that are being poached. The big ones with the big tusks get poached. So then the elephants with the smaller tusks, the males, they're able to kind of sneak by and breed because the demand for ivory is so high. Poachers are willing to, commit horrible, crimes to get a hold of that product. And so then those smaller tusked males have kind of a monopoly. All the females, they don't have any big tusked males to choose from. So now they're going with the small tusked males because they're the ones that are left. And then that trait is passed down. That's a very quick natural selection. I call it unnatural selection because it's where we are intervening and removing a part of the reproductive population, which causes these little trickle down changes, right? It's not nature that's selecting these. Nature selected these traits in the first place to help these animals survive. But now that warning signal, hey, stay away, becomes a, hey, look at me, I'm over here. That's not what the rattlesnake want. Those rattlesnakes that are continuing to do that, they're being found, they're being killed. The ones that aren't doing that are breeding and passing that tendency down to their offspring. So there is quite a bit of truth in that. Can you kill alligators legally? Yes and no. I wouldn't say kill. There is a hunting season in most of their range now, and that's actually one of the leading causes of their being taken off of the endangered species list. In fact, not too long ago, alligators were endangered throughout most of their natural range because of illegal and unregulated hunting. And so people were catching them without any sort of laws in place. And we were just going, oh, boo-hoo, that stinks. I really hope that the alligators can make a comeback. And they were just being slaughtered endlessly. And so then the government pulls together and says, hey, listen, we'll have a season where you can hunt these animals legally. You have to pay for a game tag. And then they pull that money that they're making, a good chunk of it, and putting it into new wild areas to conserve these animals and new places where these alligators can exist outside of the hunting areas and breed and reproduce. And that has helped bring a lot of money into funding alligator conservation. So that's kind of sometimes people think that's kind of a nasty part of conservation, but conservation is about saving ecosystems and saving entire species, not necessarily individual animals. You know what I mean? If you told me, hey, if you could kill one rhino and save all of rhinos for all of eternity and not a single other one of them would be killed by a human again, would you do it? And I would say I absolutely would want for all the rhinos to survive. And sadly, that one individual, if that's going to cause the rest of them to go extinct, we need to remove that one individual in order to continue the population of the rest of them. And it sounds kind of backwards because you think, well, we love animals, right? Absolutely. I love animals. I couldn't bring myself to do it, honestly. But But that's the ideology, and that's where people get hung up on that kind of technicality, where you have certain animal rights groups and certain organizations that mean well. They're not necessarily trying to combat conservation, but by limiting what we can do to bring money into conservation, they're kind of cutting people off at the knees. Sadly, stuff like trophy hunting and game farms and that type of thing, while ugly and not something I would ever associate with, do bring a ton of money into conservation. And that's the sad reality of it, is if people don't make money off of these animals, there's not going to be any incentive to protect them. People are not really going to do things out of the goodness of their hearts. Sadly, at least not these big corporations or countries as a whole. If they see these animals are actually bringing in a lot of ecotourism, they'll have some money from that to protect them. But a lot of these rural countries or agricultural countries that have these at-risk species, it can help for them to select some older individuals that maybe are no longer breeding or have been killing females and things like that, to be selected to almost auction off for conservation and have some fat dentist come and shoot them. And while that's terrible, it does in the long run, and can in the long run, save an entire species. And that's what we've seen happen with alligators. So you can kill them legally with permitting in the proper place with the proper equipment. There's obviously a ton of regulations on that. If you're using them for food, I don't personally hunt animals, but I'm not necessarily against foraging for organisms in their natural environment. They've lived in the wild. We originally were hunter-gatherer people. And if that's part of how you feed your family, and you use all the meat and the skin and whatever you can use, I don't see anything necessarily morally wrong with that. I try and be ethical. I'm not a vegan. I do eat meat, so that kind of ties in there, I guess. Don't kill alligators though. How long does it take for a rattlesnake to kill you? It can take a few days. Rattlesnakes are hemotoxic primarily. I assume I'm going to just talk about diamondback rattlesnake because that's the most common one. There's some other types of venom compositions and a bunch of other species, but we'll talk about western diamondback. It's primarily hemotoxic, so typically you can honestly survive a lot of those bites. You just will lose limbs. It starts to rot your flesh and bone and blood, and so you can, if you don't get to the hospital in time, you could lose a hand, fingers, or hands, or your full arm, and that type of thing. So that can get infected and then kill you. But it usually is going to take days for a rattlesnake bite to actually kill you. But I would, of course, recommend seeking medical treatment immediately if you were to be bitten by them. Ants Montenegro says, is it true that ant venom, Pogonomyrmex, Myrmecia paraponera, is one of the most toxic among insects and other inverts, but doesn't affect the human body as much because of the low yield? That's exactly right. So things like Pogonomyrmex maricopa is one of the most toxic insects on the planet. If they had, a venom gland the size of a ping pong ball, they could probably kill a room full of people with that venom. It is very toxic. Myrmecia as well. And what's crazy about Myrmecia, which are the bull ants, their venom is highly volatile, and people tend to develop an allergy to it over time. So some species like the jack jumpers and things like that, the more people get stung, typically the more reactant they get to it, to the point where they start to go into anaphylaxis, which is a complete allergic reaction, and they can die from those stings because their body reacts so violently to it. But that's exactly right. It's that whole yield argument, right? You could have some of the most toxic organisms on the planet, but if they inject you with a microscopic amount of venom, it might not even be enough for you to feel it, right? But that's essentially right. They're super toxic in venom potency, but not so much in yield. If they were 5 times the size, 10 times the size, they'd be really scary. They'd be a lot more scary than they are now. And some of those larger ants are pretty intimidating. Ever had an encounter with the red wasp? I know Texas has them. Hope you have never been stung by them. They hurt, from what I've heard, a lot. I have. I actually have filmed a video on that. Texas. I mean, it's not necessarily just a Texas species of wasp. In fact, it's named after the Carolinas. You can find it all over, typically the southern United States. It's called Polistes carolina, or the red paper wasp, and they hurt quite a bit. If you're interested in that video, it's over in my Sting video playlist. When I went to Thailand, I was watching a greater banded hornet nest. They, in their own way, are unique insects. So are Japanese giant hornets. Yeah, they're some of the coolest hymenopterans out there. I love some of those larger Asian hornets. I'd love to find some more this year. Hopefully, hopefully, hopefully. Can you own a pet alligator? Plenty of countries, I mean, not countries, states, excuse me, allow ownership of alligators. I shy away from using that word pet because I don't think that they make very good pets. But I am a firm believer in, if you can properly maintain, house, and feed an animal to the best of your, your abilities. Oh my gosh. To the best of your abilities, and in a way that is essentially replicating what the animal gets and needs in the wild, I'm all for that. I equivalate that more to a privately owned zoological specimen, but it's legal to own an alligator in quite a few states. Pennsylvania to be one. It's illegal to own one in Texas because they're protected species here. Am I having a stroke? I don't know. We'll see. I'm tired. I've been going for the past week, and I still have like 2 hours of homework to do after this. Thanks for answering about the roundup. That is despicable. Truly enrages me. Those people are sickening. Yeah, it's just a disaster. Those rattlesnake roundups, they're terrible. I've heard they're setting up a conservation somewhere in northern Alaska to help the polar bear population. Yeah, so polar bears are tricky because polar bears are environmental specialists. And what I mean by that is they completely depend on their natural environment to survive. And sadly, with global temperatures rising and sea ice becoming less and less frequent and thick and reliable, their entire hunting method is kind of melting underneath them, pun intended. And so what's happening is these animals are no longer able to get enough food to survive. They're no longer able to hunt for prey during the winter months when they really, really need that. And they just kind of are getting screwed over. So it's really important for us to try and remedy that whole issue of carbon emissions and global temperatures rising, and at the same time preserve those animals, because what's starting to happen is a natural process from an unnatural reason. So polar bears are trickling down from the Arctic Circle, and brown bears are trickling up because now it's getting a little bit warmer. So they're starting to overlap, and they're actually interbreeding, which makes a very dangerous type of bear, capable of eating both meat, heavy meat diet, but also omnivorous to a great extent. Very large, very intelligent, very dangerous, and a lot more versatile in terms of what environments it can habitate. And that's how new species arise. That's how adaptation works. These two species separated, lineages, and they blend back together once it's convenient again. And then we've got, super grizzlies, that are, 20-30% larger than a normal grizzly bear, a little bit smaller than a polar bear, but faster or more aggressive or needs to eat more food. It can cause all sorts of disruptions. So it's always a good idea to try and preserve the natural ecosystems that we have and those organisms within those ecosystems. So I'm glad to hear that they're setting up some stuff in northern Alaska to help the polar bears. There's a feral pet bunny problem in Canmore, which has been drawing predators into the town site. They were going to cull them all, or as many as possible, but there was a mini outrage. Sadly, that's what we get when we're trying to deal with this type of thing. People really associate with dogs, with cats, with rabbits, and other types of pet animals that are super detrimental to the ecosystems where they become invasive. Feral cats kill billions of animals a year, native animals, and don't even eat most of them. They just kill them, kill another. And our songbird populations have just been dropping, our small mammal populations dropping, everything dropping, and it's because of these invasive animals. But you mentioned something like, well, I think we need to remove all of them, and there's a huge outrage because people only care about what they're familiar with and what they care about, and that's the whole point of Jacksonville Wildlife, is to say, no, 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 look, there's a whole world of animals that you need to be able to connect with and care about, right? Because if you care about all your native songbirds, all your native small mammals, it's going to hurt you when you hear that cats are killing them by the billions, right? You're going to say, well, as much as I like cats, we could save billions of animals by culling, a few 100,000 feral animals. That seems like it's worth it, right? It's that same argument, right? We're taking, a small group of animals and kind of sacrificing them on the altar to save the vast majority, right? It's all or nothing, right? Take a little bit, offer them up to the conservation gods, and let the rest of the population flourish, right? And that's that sticky, nasty kind of tread. And I don't talk about that in a lot of my videos just because it's really polarizing, right? People had a mini outrage. People will come after me for that type of thing. But it's the truth. If we killed every feral cat across the world, our environments would be a better place. Feral cats can carry toxoplasmosis, which can kill all sorts of organisms, marine life if they're near the ocean, pooping in the sand. They can kill whales and dolphins and all sorts of animals with that nasty parasite that gets in feral cat feces. They can kill a bunch of animals, right? And then there's these stupid things like neuter and release programs. Like, I don't care if they were going to have babies. They're already killing, thousands of animals per cat, every few months. We need to remove the cats in general. But things like rabbits, they're out competing native animals because people like them. They think they're cute. They're familiar with them. A lot of people have relationships with those similar types of animals. It gets very difficult to get the public on your side when you're trying to address these super critical and really time sensitive types of things that we need to really address. And that just makes it really difficult and sad. Jack, still thinking about the Amazon basin? Would love to. But like I said, we got to see what funding we're looking at for this year. I pretty much, me and my cameraman mostly pay for all of this stuff ourselves. And some of these trips can be, thousands and thousands of dollars. So right now, I think through YouTube, I make between $80 and $150 a month through advertisements. So we're a ways away from having Jacksonville Wildlife kind of pay for itself. And I'm not complaining. I love to do it. It just makes it really difficult to try and get to all the places that we'd like to go within a set time frame. But absolutely, if it pops up and it's going to be really easy and cost effective to go down to the Amazon basin this year, I would love to do it. So the bunny story continues. It says that they were cute and fuzzy, so they didn't want to kill them. So they culled about half, which didn't do anything because they just bred and replaced the population in no time. You got to take them all out, right? I will admit I'm a hunter, but only to feed myself and my family. I only take what I need or want, never more, or to donate people who need it most. 100% okay with that. I mean, even on top of hunting for just sustenance, like I said, there are ecological benefits to some of the pay to play style things where you can be able to pay armed guards to protect the rhinos in the park. So it becomes very difficult to navigate some of those tricky situations. But of course, to feed yourself and your family, gotta go for it. Guilty. I've got 5 cats, but they have bell collars, so birds and small animals know that they're coming. Even then, cats that decreases the amount that they can kill by about 40%. But that other 60%. So instead of billions, we're still looking at 600 million animals. I have a cat. He stays inside. It's just a dangerous world for a cat too outside. They get hit by cars, owls and hawks will eat them. Parasites, kids throwing rocks and shooting BB guns at feral animals all the time. It's just you like your cat. Build a catio if they want to hang out outside a little bit. But it's wisest to keep your cat indoors. You would fight a grizzly bear? Whew, I don't know about that. For me, I would be pretty nervous about fighting a grizzly bear. Familiar with the western blue-tailed skink? Rumor says they are venomous. They've gone a little bit crazy with the whole venomous thing. Bearded dragons are now venomous. All the monitors are now venomous. Some of it's based in some reason, but some of it is just like, okay, let's go back to the original argument that we've been talking about this whole time: potency, yield. Okay, there's a little bit of a dissolving enzyme in their saliva that you could qualify as a mild venom. Is it venomous? Is it not? What qualifies something as venomous? Like, all spiders are venomous. We don't usually call all spiders venomous. I mean, most spiders are venomous. Like I said, there's a few outliers, but most spiders are venomous. We're not going to call them all venomous. Why? Because we're basing it off of our scale. So yeah, maybe to a 3-inch long gecko, that skink is one of the most toxic animals to walk the earth. But to us, okay, he's got a few extra, little chemical compounds in his saliva that we could qualify as a venom type. But that's a very good point. Jack, man, I'm such a big fan. You deserve so much fame. I appreciate it. I think so too. Any Ufaga you are looking to add to your collection this year? Great question. I'm actually working on a little kind of backpedal project. I am holding back a lot of my Histrionica and Sylvatica this year in order to pair out some secondary groups of what I'm working with right now. But I'm hoping to have all that done by the end of this summer. And then I'd really like to add some more Sylvatica. I'd love to add some Ufaga Sylvatica Lita, maybe some nice Paru, Rio Durango. I'd also like to get some more Histrionica, some bullseyes. I don't have any bullseyes. I'd love to get some saddlebacks, maybe some Fuego. I don't know. My list is never ending, but my wallet, sadly, is finite. And those Histrionica, some of those new ones, $800, $900, $1,100, $1,200, $1,500 a pop. It takes a bit. And so I'm hoping with this secondary breeding group, I can start producing twice as many froglets, selling twice as many next year, and I should get back out on top, hoping to get a little bit more frog money kind of stirring around. I'd like to get to the point where my frogs can just fund more frogs instead of my business and other things just going into frogs, because I need that money for just operational costs and whatnot. And then when I'm like, but I do have enough to grab some of those right now. I kind of get myself in trouble that way. My cats have a catio. Great, love to hear it. That's the best thing. I take my cat outside sometimes and just supervise him. He just likes to lay on the porch on the concrete and lay in the sun. He doesn't really do anything. But cats in general, outdoor cats, feral cats. Not only is it dangerous for the cat, it kills millions of animals a year, billions. Your list sounds a lot like mine. It's a good list. Speaking of reptiles, if you can make it there, would you be brave enough to document Komodo dragons? I was actually thinking, I almost went and did that when we went to Thailand. We were so close to Indonesia. We were thinking we would go down to Komodo and Rinca Island and film Komodo dragons. So absolutely, I have no problem filming with Komodo dragons. That might be intimidating to some people, but I've been working with, dangerous animals and reptiles my whole life. So just kind of, the usual for me. I would love to get some footage with some nice big Komodo dragons. Absolutely. Thoughts on the chytrid fungus? It's terrible. It's killed so many beautiful species of frogs and so many more that we've never even discovered. It's a horrible frog pandemic, and I hate it. That's one of the major reasons why I've got all my stuff up here. All my frogs is part of a bit of a conservation program. I get them from a sustainable source, and they put a lot of that money that they get from selling the frogs back into conservation and buying new places to conserve new parts of the rainforest and that type of stuff. And so it's super important. Some of this kind of captive hobby and sort of genetic storage, where I've got frogs that I can trace direct lineages back to their wild counterparts, and if ever need be, I can pool together with all the other people, in my dart frog community, and we could completely reintroduce an entire, locality to its ancestral forests, which is really, really cool. If I have some extra Lita, I'll send you a message. Sounds good. If they're good, don't be like, yeah, this one's got some nice turquoise spots, and this one's super beautiful. That one, meh. Hey, Jack. Hey, man, check out this extra Lita. I'll sell it to you real cheap. um, and I don't want them getting hit by one of the trains. Good plan. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. We're right at over an hour. I'm going to try and get some stuff filmed this week. We maybe will be able to film with a beautiful Gila monster. I don't know. Would you guys like to see a Gila monster? But anyway, I really appreciate you guys turning in. That wasn't English. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Dang it. I really appreciate you guys tuning in to today's live stream. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you had fun. I'm gonna try and get back on somewhat of a regular schedule. I've got some new work stuff on the weekends now, so it's kind of difficult for me to keep up with the live streams, but I'm hoping to get videos released at least twice a week. Send all of your positive vibes my way, because that's going to be one heck of a feat if I can get all that stuff done. But I am so gracious that you all have joined me today. After this is over, jump into the comment section and check out and just comment something that you liked about the video. If you haven't seen our latest video, the sloth video, I think it turned out really good. You can go check that out. And I'm hoping to have something released by next weekend, but be patient with me. I'm trying to get all this stuff figured out. I'm at school full time now. I run my own business. I'm trying to get Jacksonville Wildlife up and running. So it is just whew. But thank you all for tuning in. I really enjoyed our conversations tonight, and I will see you upon a later time. So keep an eye out for new videos and keep on watching.